I would say one of the biggest impacts this sort of mindset and practice has had is it really levels out the anxiety and the angst about what it means to be a generous person and a good steward of things, because it's not up to me to meet every need that comes across my way. The needs are infinite and my resources are finite, but it's a very freeing thing in that we just respond to the things that God seems to put in our path and try to do that with an element of risk and an element of due diligent common sense, and it's a blessing to be in on that program. I remember newly married, my wife and I were in our mid-20s, and this was a period of our life where having a special dinner date night out meant going to Wendy's, basically. So we were just getting started and things were tight. I was actually in between jobs, and we had, up to this point, we had committed to give to a couple different missionary causes that we felt called to give to, and we had basically, the checkbook was empty, and we were down to some very meager remnants of our savings, and we both just felt strongly that we needed to practice both obedience and faith in responding to Jesus' calling in our lives. So we wrote a check to these missionaries when there really seemed no way to, it didn't seem to make a lot of sense. And why do I say that? It's not because we felt great. You know, Jesus tells the story of the lady with a couple cents, and she gave everything we had. And even though it kind of felt that way to us, it really wasn't the case, even though it did feel that way a little bit. But that was it was sort of a pivotal marking point in this long incremental journey of faith and obedience, in that it sort of drew a line in the sand for us. That little step of risk and faith has just produced wonderful benefits in our lives. It's made us more and more, it's like baby steps in that Bill Murray movie where you've seen the psychiatrist and the guy tells him, take baby steps. It's kind of like that. That was a pivotal turning point in our lives where we said, we'll trust God when He says He'll take care of us by practicing what He's laid on our hearts. And over the years that's grown. What has it meant to us motivationally? We look back on things like that. It's points in our life where we've trusted, we've reached out a little bit beyond our comfort zone, and God has said, this is great, and taken us to the next step. We've gone through phases of my career in our lives where we've had little, where we've had a lot, we've had a little again, and a lot again. One of the biggest challenges with, I guess, this sort of mindset and life practice, in some ways, I'm not sure they change a lot from whether you're just feeling like you're starting out on this journey of trying to be a more generous and service-oriented person, or you're kind of a long way down the road. I think the challenges are pretty much the same, and it kind of gets down to, for me personally, a question both of motivation and maybe intentionality. The motivation, like most things in life, if I'm pure in my motives, in that, you know what, I really am compelled by the love of Christ. He gave it all for me, and I want to be like that. I want to be that kind of a person. So when I just find when my motivation is along those lines, that the actual sort of the logistics of giving and serving is kind of fade into the back burner. It seems less of an issue. So I would say, if I had some advice, it would be, examine sort of motivationally where you at, and focus on love and gratitude. And that sort of spawns then, okay, so what, practically speaking, experientially, what do next steps look like? And this really hasn't changed through the years. Sometimes the commas and zeros and before the decimal point change over time, but the actual process doesn't change much. And for me, it's this almost always uneasy, gratifying and uncomfortable combination of risk-taking and faith that I'm hearing from God, and this is something He really wants me to be invested in, and obedience. That, basically, I think one of the things that shifted over time through the years, kind kind of slowly, and at times it comes in big bunches. But that's our thinking. My thinking of my wife and I has kind of changed from how much are we going to give to what are we keeping and why. And again, this isn't some do-goody little red engine that could, go up the generosity hill thing. It's really driven out of why are we doing this? And kind of the big question, what am I here for? What are we doing on earth here for? We're all taking a long walk off a short pier, really. And so, how do I want to live this life? In a sense, maybe in some ways to a smaller degree, how do I want to be remembered by the people that knew me? Hopefully as a boy, those Todd and Jenny, they were, were a lot like Jesus in some of these ways. So that's the motivation. And then sort of the incremental steps. It's never a little less than uncomfortable when you're taking a step out to help other people, I don't think. And these principles and mindset and behaviors work in the next generation. Well, I certainly think so. They've been working in the next generation for a few millennium, right? So I think that's very possible, and I think God's calling each generation to be, His generation. Looking at myself and maybe the generation behind me, which would be the Generation X, Y, millennials, I've noticed a couple things in general. One would be I just admire the high degree of sense of altruism and a search for mercy and justice and those kinds of things in what to me is the next generation, and I think they're awesome. At the same time, in general, I think there's a little danger flag that I see in that there's a tendency to acquiesce to cultural norms, and in the United States of America, that's not necessarily a good thing. So there's a tension there. I also think there's a little bit of a disconnect between the benefits that my next generation has received from one or two generations of people who have worked very hard and accumulated degrees of wealth and resource that's basically been given to them. And so I think if this next generation can combine that strong sense and desire to really to help other people and do something significant and impactful, not just have vocational success, I have high hopes. And I sometimes hear the question, both in my own head and from other people, hey, I give of my time, I give of my talents, I give of my money. Is it one or all three? I think, because I ask myself this question, it's really kind of a stupid question. It's a stupid question because that's not the way I want to be treated by God or other people, right? I said, well, look, Mom and Dad, I want you to give me your time, but not, feed and clothe me. Or my best friend, I don't want you to apply your talents to me because you're my buddy and you're my dentist. So you can withhold your talents and just send me a check once in a while. We don't think that way. We don't want to live that way. We don't want other people to treat us that way. So when it comes down to this arena, am I a giving person? Am I a serving person? I think it's a cop-out personally when I think in terms of that question, because it's not the way I want to be treated, and it's not really the way we treat other people. So to me, you're all in or you're not all in, right? How much is enough, right? So because it sort of reveals in me this, what am I trying to scam the Lord, or am I trying to look good to other people but not really be that kind of a person? I don't want to be that kind of a hypocritical person. So the question of how much is enough, that also is a very revealing question, maybe not a stupid one. I think it's a very tough question, just like what we were talking about before about sort of incremental, how do you become a more generous and serving person? I once watched a 60 Minutes television interview with one of the Rockefeller brothers, I forget which one, and the 60 Minutes interviewer asked him, hey, you're one of the wealthiest people in the United States of America. How much is enough? And his answer was just a little bit more. I think that's very revealing of where most of us come from. Just a little bit more of what? Just a little bit more of, so my self-indulgent desires can be satisfied? Or kind of the flip side of that coin, just a little bit more so that I can be a more generous and serving person? What do we mean by just a little bit more? Just a little bit more so that I feel a little bit of pain in prying this from my fingers, or just a little bit more, I can't wait to bestow blessing upon somebody else. So how much is enough? I have no idea how much is enough. I really don't, but I encourage myself, and I'd encourage who's ever watching this, to think in terms of what are you really asking? How much is enough what? On the receiving end or the giving end, how much is enough? Maybe just wrap up my thoughts with something someone once shared with me that was very freeing in my stewardship, particularly of money. They shared with me that, hey, Todd, guess what? God doesn't need your money. Number two, God doesn't even want your money unless it's coming out of the right motivation with a thankful heart. And number three, it's not your money.